Good evening, everyone. Feel free to grab a seat or, mill around in the back. That's also fine. There's also a couple seats in the front. No one ever likes to sit in front, but I don't know why. You can see better, you can hear better. It's nice. We're very friendly. Feel free. And actually, if we I'm going to go ahead and bring out a few extra chairs if folks want to sit in the back too, so don't worry about that. My name is Aaron Ju. I'm EFF's Director of Member Engagement. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Before we get started, I have a couple of items of housekeeping. So first of all, we all know digital connections are a lifeline to people all around the world, so I want you to feel comfortable tweeting, skeeting, tooting, whatever that is. But for the duration of our short program, please do silence your devices, just so we don't spook our speakers today. So of course, we also take your safety and comfort very seriously. So we have event guidelines at EFF.org/event expectations if you'd like to check that out and learn more. If you have any questions or need any assistance, feel free to ask any of the EFF staffers. We're all noted by our name tags, our staff name tags. And we also have a designated event monitor. That's Jocelyn Maker over there. Jocelyn, hello. Thank you. She is EFF's Director of Introduce. Thank you for your help. One other note, you'll notice a couple of people, you may notice a couple of people around the room have your photo stickers, so just please do be respectful of that. Also, I wanted to let you guys know that the speakers will be recorded so that we can share tonight's program with other members who could not be here tonight. So it's just pointed this way in case you're curious. We'll also be passing the mic around toward the end of our program so that folks in the audience can ask live questions. But alternatively, if you would like to write down a question, we have some index cards on your tables. Feel free to grab one of those and write down your question. If you're feeling a little shy today or just not up to speaking through the mic, you can write down your question anytime during the program and just hold up your hand like this. One of us will come around and pick it up from you, and we'll read on your behalf and answer as many questions as we can at the end of the program. That's good. Okay. So, all right, let's get started. So again, I'm really glad to be here. Thank you so much for coming. Once a year, we invite all of EFF's Bay Area members to come together in Meet Space so that we can make connections with each other. And also, we love telling you about the cool work that you are supporting that we think is like super important and nerdy and exciting. This gives us that opportunity. Thank you for that. So it probably goes without saying that right now is a really precarious time for civil liberties and human rights advocates around the world. I'm really grateful for the EFF members and other supporters around the world who are helping to protect our rights to privacy and free speech. Now, privacy and free speech, these are undoubtedly cornerstones of democracy. These are the base on which we build all social movements. And so that's why tonight we wanted to address a couple of things. At this year's Speakeasy, we're going to talk a little bit about the California legislature and also, the California legislature and Silicon Valley. So both have played leading roles in defining tech policy throughout the US. And of course, many of the decisions that get made here, they have a rippling effect throughout experiences of people around the world. In sort of like this, let's say a heightened climate where political and cultural anxieties focus on big tech more than ever, what can we do to move toward a future where the rights of technology users and creators are protected? So to help us think through this, we've invited a couple of folks, of wonderful experts from EFF. First is Maddie Daly. She's EFF's Assistant Director of Federal Affairs. Her work focuses on federal issues relating to privacy, intellectual property, competition, and AI. As a former congressional staffer, Maddie uses this understanding of both legislative process and policymaking dynamics to defend civil liberties in the digital arena. We also have Chao Liu, who is EFF's Senior Legislative Associate. He assists in EFF's advocacy for a free, open, and accessible internet, both in state legislatures and in Congress. Please give a warm welcome to Maddie and Chao.
Hi, everybody. Really nice nice to be with you guys this evening. It's nice to meet you all. I'm Maddie. I am EFF's Assistant Director of Federal Affairs, so I'm one of our federal lobbyists here at EFF, and I'm here with Chao.
Hey there, Chao, Senior Legislative Associate, EFF. Thank you, Aaron, for the wonderful introduction. And we're going to talk about the legislative process.
Yeah, so EFF has a number of various angles in which we tackle the issues that are really bread and butter to us. Our angle is the legislature, and so what that means is that Chao talks to both state legislatures across the country and in Congress. I focus exclusively on federal affairs, so we make trips to DC about once a quarter and talk to lawmakers there about some of the most pressing issues that we're dealing with. So this is consumer privacy, intellectual property, Section 230, Section 702 of FISA, which is sort of the government surveillance issue that has been highly prevalent these days, particularly. So I've been really proud to work for an organization that's really well respected, both in the industry here, but also in DC. We have a really unique voice, and I think that really comes through when we're in the room and at the table. We have technologists, we have lawyers, we have advocates, and all of these various sort of facets in how we approach our issue gives us a really unique perspective that often we're the only ones. For example, when I was most recently at a panel that one of the committees in the House Judiciary Committee hosted, we were the only public interest voice in the room. And that's not unusual for us. So EFF is always going to be in the fight. We're always going to be engaged, even when that's sort of a difficult conversation and people might not like what we have to say, we're still going to say it. So especially now, even as, federal affairs is as messy as it's ever been, we are continuing to be engaged and to be strong advocates for the values that we've held for 30 years. So I'll let Chao kind of take it from there.
Yeah, and building off what you said, for us, our constituent is the user. There are trade associations in which obviously their constituent is the associated are their members. There are folks who are stand very much on certain principles or certain groups. So for us, we are trying to stand for the creators, for the users, for the folks who inhabit spaces like these, who are trying to just do something cool, create a product, and making sure that the person who is here trying to do something, trying to disrupt the industry, trying to break in, isn't crushed by owner's regulation, isn't crushed by monopolistic actors who are trying to create laws that are good for me but not for thee. And so, as Maddie was saying, my work is in California, across the 49 states, and in DC as well. This year, my focus has been more on the California side and the state side. With Trump 2.0, what we're trying to do is really continue the work of what we did in Trump 1.0, and that is make California a sanctuary state, make California the bastion that we are in protecting people and giving other states a sort of template of which they can build on. As they say, that the way, what is it that they say? As California goes, so does the nation. And so for better or worse, I should say, because sometimes we do some weird things here in California. But when we can get good privacy laws here, when we can get good, say, net neutrality laws here, that is a template for other states to build off of.
Yeah, and I think that, the experts that we have here, it means that when EFF stands behind a piece of legislation, you know that it's vetted and it's a strong bill that, will it pass 100% of the time? No, probably not, but it means that it's expert vetted, and that was, for me as a staffer, what really drew me to EFF was when I saw that name as an endorsement, I knew that's a good bill because it's not common. We're not slapping our name on anything. It really does ring true as something that's been vetted through not only our lawyers to, go through all of the analysis that the many legal reviews go through, but the technologists know how this has been implemented when they were in industry, when they worked at various companies. They know if I were a company and I had this new regulation that I now had to comply with, what would that look like? And so that really informs how we view what legislation is. And that's what we bring to lawmakers is we say, listen, I don't know if you are intending this as a consequence, but this is how platforms are going to take this. And sometimes, that's the point, and sometimes it's not. So most recently, when I was back 2 weeks ago, the House was considering this bill called the Take It Down Act. The Senate has already passed it, and it's on a glide path, unfortunately, to be signed into law relatively soon. But the House was considering this piece of legislation that essentially makes it easier and quicker to take down content. And we had raised strong objections to this bill because although the intention that was stated was that it's for NCII or non-consensual intimate imagery, when you actually read the bill, it's very broad in its definition and would have sweeping takedowns. And so when we raised this to lawmakers, sometimes they really hadn't actually read the full legislation and understood how broad those definitions actually are and what that would look like in practice. And not only that, there was an encryption piece that really was unintended that would threaten to break encryption. And so when we brought that to various lawmakers across both the House and the Senate, they were interested to hear what would our fix be. So we had our lawyers draft amendment language and say, listen, I understand this is a bill that you intend to pass. We have fundamental issues with what you are trying to do here, but I would amend this to fix, at least at a minimum, this encryption piece. Was that taken up by the chairman? No, it was not. But we did get a lot of interest from lawmakers in hearing what we had to say in a way that was politically, it was a very sensitive fight. No one wants to be the guy to vote no against something that is meant to, protect victims of revenge porn, which is part of what makes a lot of these fights so insidious. When you're using children's safety as a cudgel or as sort of this umbrella under which you can do a lot of very broad, harmful things, it makes it politically very difficult. And so that's where we come in with both the technical understanding, but also the messaging of how do you tell people to how they can fight back against this. And I think now more than ever, that message is being heard, and that niche that we fill is more and more important.
And building off that, we have this, EFF traditionally has had this niche of free speech, privacy, encryption, very more technical, both on the technology side and on the legal side, issues that I think the Supreme Court said it best, they're not the nine most experts of the internet, right? They're not the 9 experts of the internet. Lawmakers are not experts of the internet. They're not experts of free speech. They're not experts of encryption. I'm realizing this is live stream, so I will tamp down on my snark. But I go into a lot of meetings with this mindset of they have good intentions. They have good intentions. They just don't really know what their bill does. So an example of that is, there's this language right now in California that says, platforms should take responsibility of the ordinary care and skill toward a child. Okay, we can all agree bad things happen on the internet. We can all agree that we should protect children. What is ordinary care and skill? I would bet a sum of money that we all have different definitions of ordinary care and skill if we were to list it out. And I would bet that the people in this room have a very different take on what ordinary care and skill for a child is, what being responsible for a child is, compared to, let's say, I'm from the Central Valley, so I'm going to pick on Kern County. As someone from Kern County, someone from Riverside, someone from Texas. And so when you put those opposing views against each other, what does it mean for a platform to take responsibility for ordinary care and skill? Well, does that mean that they have to take down all content about gender-affirming care, all content about reproductive health, all content about even like tackle football because of head trauma? And so while we have this niche, we are then able to, through wheels like this, converse with groups like Planned Parenthood, converse with groups like the Trevor Project, converse with all these other areas and all these other groups doing good work in other areas and say, hey, how can we help you? How can you help us? How can, in this moment, in this front moment, how can we be there for each other?
Yeah, I think this has been a moment of uniting with our coalition partners across other sort of issues that they focus on, whether that be LGBT rights, whether that be reproductive care. We have been adding our sort of EFF flair and expertise to those conversations, whether that means talking about encryption or talking about sort of content moderation issues. There have been a lane in each of these seemingly not digitally related topics that EFF has been able to add to. And I think that that's been, when we've heard back from our partners, that's been useful now to have someone who has that sort of background and understanding when they're sort of in uncharted waters on their end of, we don't know how to wade into what seemed like this sort of digital space that we were not previously prepared to be a part of. So it's been a lot of coalition work, but it's also been a lot of on the ground talking to folks in various stakeholder groups and talking to our national partners. We work a lot with ACLU National and ACLU State. They're one of our partner organizations, and the two of us kind of fit this niche because you can bring lawsuits and you can have advocacy work and you can have legislative work. And so it has been, particularly in the example I was giving about the Take It Down Act, which is moving through Congress, and we do expect it to be signed by the president. Now we can see it in court. I mean, that is the beauty of what EFF does, is you can kind of follow it through from the beginning to the very end. And so when we think that there are provisions that are unconstitutional, we will stand behind that and we will meet it in court. And that's sort of where we are in some of these other bills, like the Kids Online Safety Act that I mentioned. We think that there are just core pieces of that bill that are unconstitutional. And so luckily, we've been able to keep it off of the president's desk for now, but in the event that it does pass, we will have that follow through. And that's something that is relatively unique in the space, I would say. And
to add to that, it's not just that we have our legislative expertise and our litigators' expertise, we also have our technologist expertise. Oftentimes legislators will say, we have the technology to do something. It's like, really? Do we? Do you know that for sure? Because it's them and their staff and they don't know that. And they just think that if we pass a bill, we can make people nerd harder and we can do something that is actually not possible. Or they say, we can build a backdoor to encryption, but still keep encryption. I'm pretty sure that's not how, I would say I'm not a technologist. I'm pretty sure that's not how encryption works.
That's not how it works.
But it is a very prevalent argument where, I want to draft this legislation to, quote unquote, bring groups to the table. I want this to be the negotiating standpoint. And to us, we want to be there to say, that's not how this works. And it's important for us to be there because they're not going to wait for EFF to wade in before continuing on with an ill-advised piece of legislation. So we want to stay focused and we want to stay engaged. And that means monitoring what's happening at a state level, but even at a federal level. You know, things are crazy and they're going to keep getting crazier, but it's important to still continue to show up and be engaged and to continue to tell people what is actually how things get done out here. And I think that that's been a meaningful message that's been received when we're back on those trips.
And where there's no action on the federal level, it all moves to the state level. And so
whatever Chao tells me is coming out of the states, that's when I know it's coming at the federal level. So we're not always opposed to things. I know many of the things that we've mentioned up here tonight we've been in opposition to. It's not that we, want to be opposing regulation. We just want to get it right. And that's really what we're here for, is to get it right. And so we're very detail oriented when it comes to precise language and definitions, because that's how it matters when a law gets implemented. Those definitions really matter. If it's a may, if it's a shall, and who you're talking to needs to be clearly defined. And so you do actually need to read every word of that bill to know what we're talking about here. And that's what we're here to do.
yeah, and so that's almost like the perfect segue to talk about our EFF's two top priority bills in California legislature this session. So our first bill is AB 1355. My homework to you is to go and read it. I expect not you to actually do it, but put an idea into your mind, which is a location needed privacy bill. In this moment in time, location needed privacy that's where you go, that's where you work, you're here right now, right? That's where you worship. That's your friends. That tells with your location, I can tell you who you are. And so we want to pass, working together with like Consumer Reports and other groups, we're trying to pass a very good location data privacy bill that restricts the sort of public-private partnership of it and restricts private actors from sharing that information. And so, I'm talking about this in the context like the people in this room, but that then applies to, well, if we have good location data privacy, that applies to people coming from out of state into California seeking healthcare. That applies to protecting immigrants. That applies to everyone, right? Everyone's location is important. Our second big bill is on, and stay with me here, is on reforming the Information Practices Act in California. The Information Practices Act of 1977 was passed in 1977, and it regulates how state agencies in California, it governs how state agencies in California handle their information. So it basically says that state agencies must have privacy policies. Notice I keep saying state agencies, not local agencies, not municipalities. We want to extend the language of that bill into local agencies, into cities, into LA, into your water districts, so it covers all California. Because while, the city county of San Francisco, I actually don't know what city we're in right now, wherever we are right now. Mountain View, Santa Clara County, got that one. While Santa Clara County, while the counties here have people and have the interest to protect people's information, the same cannot be said for other counties in California. And because of the way that data is shared between counties for the purposes of whatever they're doing, tracking, whether that's like homelessness efforts, for whatever reason they're sharing that information, what happens is the most conservative county in California will likely have information about people that is in the most progressive counties in California, and they'll have information about the most vulnerable people in California, and they can then go, because there's nothing governing them, they can go and share that information to whoever they please. So we would like to extend the governing practices that are already in place for state agencies into the local agencies, and once again, allow California to be a sanctuary and have the best privacy practices in all the land.
There you go. Well, we're very principled in our vision of the future, and we really stick to those values. Like I said, even when that's hard, even when we're the only ones in the room saying that, it's something that we've held true for decades and will continue to. It's really core to our mission and the way we approach our work. So protecting digital privacy, protecting freedom of expression, civil liberties, that is always going to be sort of at the core of every single bill that we analyze, every single conversation that we're in, every panel we're on, every testimony that we give. That's the core of our work. So with that, I don't know if we're at time to open for questions, but would love to hear any questions that you all have for us.
At the very outset, it was mentioned that sometimes EFF, or actually quite frequently, EFF is the only public advocacy group in the room. That seems like a little bit of a red flag. Like, could you go into a bit more detail of who else is in the room and why there aren't more groups that are advocating for the public?
Sure. I mean, we certainly, as I mentioned later, we have a lot of coalition partners and we have a lot of advocacy partners. We work very closely in our DC work with the Center for Democracy and Technology. Like I mentioned, we also work very closely with ACLU. But I will say that because we are a free expression organization, in addition to a digital privacy, we sort of intersect at a pretty unique lane. And so we're looking at bills that other digital privacy orgs aren't necessarily paying attention to, that they're focused on other issues, or that because we are member funded and we're member driven, we sort of have more flexibility than some other organizations that work with us. And sometimes we're the only ones in the room in the example that I gave because we were the only ones invited. And we want to be able to be there and engage and be at the table because we know, like I said, that lawmakers are not necessarily waiting for EFF or any other organization to wait and give their opinion and then roll out the red carpet. We have to really be there while the negotiations are happening if we want to make a difference. So that's not to say that we don't have coalition partners who we work with very closely. We absolutely do. There just are certain, because I think of the free expression angle particularly, that leave us in a pretty unique lane.
And to add to that, on the state level, there is often the unfortunate reality of resources and the fact that sometimes our friends and us as well, like, we're a small team. We're a really small team. Our legislative team across state and federal is four people?
We're pretty small. We try and punch above our weight, but we are a small subsect of EFF's work.
We definitely punch above our weight, but in that, we have partners who are like one or two person org, and they're with us as much as they can, but sometimes they just can't be in the room. So sometimes it is just us, and we try to help each other as best we can. That is sort of an unfortunate reality sometimes, that resources matter, and sometimes they just don't have the resources.
So the House Committee on Energy and Commerce recently announced a working group that they're thinking of setting up standards for federal privacy legislation. Is this something that EFF is weighing in on?
Yes, we did weigh in. We sent in comments on the request for comment. So the House Energy and Commerce Committee, as she mentioned, created this data privacy working group. It is a partisan working group, so it unfortunately is not with both the ranking member and the chairman, it's just the majority. We submitted comments, we met with committee staff to talk about our proposal. We outlined all of the things that we look for in an ideal privacy bill, fully understanding the political climate that we're in. But again, we think it's important to still lay out that framework of what we would like to see and what's important to us. You know, data minimization, opt-in consent, all of these things that we've said for years, but it's important when the opportunity presents itself to actually communicate with committees. So to not just write it up and send it in to an email and hope someone reads it, but to follow up and actually meet with the chief counsel and walk through the proposal, which is exactly what we did a week and a half ago.
Where do you all need the most help? What would be good?
That's a great question. I always say, I wish we had like double the size of our team. It would really help us out to have some more folks. But like I said, I think just for being a small team, we still try and be as active and be as many places as we can. But it's really helpful for us to sort of hear from our members and what they care about, what you guys are seeing in your jobs. I mean, that's a lot of how we add to the conversation, especially in DC, when, like I said, that's not where everyone else is coming from. So to hear from you all is helpful to know what you experience and how it works where you are.
Can I say donate? Is that donate?
That too.
If you're not signed up for our newsletter or our emailing, please do so. Every now and again, we have EFF action alerts in which you can go and basically help us be the constituent that through our system can reach out to a member and say, hey, I care about this issue. And members do.
Yeah, don't just tell us what you think. Tell your members of Congress what you think too, because we certainly are. And again, it's super helpful to be able to say we are a 30,000 person member-driven organization, and we have 10,000 people that have told us that they don't like this, and it is super helpful. And they do care when we can go into a meeting and say we have X number of constituents in your district, and they will reach out to you and give you a call. And then when we can back that up with actual action, and we do, it makes a big difference. And it, again, is pretty unique in our coalition partners. We're one of the few that has that sort of member-driven grassroots capability.
And I would also say, tell your friends about EFF, spread the good word, show up to these things.
So I also wanted to add, in general, one thing that is really important and I don't want to discount is that last part that Chao was talking about of just talking to people in your circle, your friends and your family about digital rights issues, because they're complicated. There are things that most people don't understand. I will bet that there's a bunch of people in this room that are kind of like family tech support or the person that they go to when oh, this thing's really complicated. It's because they trust you to know about technology and how things work. So don't discount how important it is just to have a one-on-one conversation with someone and let them know why something matters, why this new bill that's coming out you should pay attention to. It is really important and something that I really value from our members.
Hello, y'all. Thanks for being here. My question is kind of less policy or less policy and more cultural. So with all the AI stuff that's coming out now and where it came from, how was that dealt with in law? Was it dealt with at all, or does all this technology just come out and then they deal with it?
The latter. At least on a federal level, Congress is typically fairly slow to catch up with technology. And sometimes that's okay. It doesn't always make a ton of sense to try and regulate before something has actually come to form. There's been a lot of chatter and a lot of conversation and certainly a lot of committee activity regarding AI regulation, but there hasn't been something signed into law to this effect. So the latter.
In California, we definitely sometimes try to get ahead of the ball to varying degrees of success, I'll put it like that. So there are definitely areas in which sometimes we look at evolving technology and we can say, well, let's take AI. AI is doing these things. They're creating these harms. These are harms that we have known about and done about for a very long time. For example, like garbage in, garbage out when it comes to data sets, right? So if you give it something a bad data set, it's going to spit out bad outcomes. Or a biased data set is going to spit out biased outcomes. We know that, so we know that if there is an AI that's looking at, let's say, rental applications, and it's being biased rental applications, well, we can create legislation on that based on existing law around existing housing law. We can say the same about like existing labor law. Like those are areas in which we can begin to try to pass the legislation to apply, like just saying like, so the technology is novel, the principles are the same, the harm is the same. So therefore, this technology can be regulated under current statute. And we can go from there. But other times, they're trying to get ahead of the ball on something that is very, very novel, that's something that they don't understand. Like, maybe even people who are developing don't really understand. And so how can we expect lawmakers to understand? And that's when we put it in front of lawyers and technologists and our people and have other people, and everyone just looks at the bill and scratches their head and goes like, I don't know what they're trying to do here. I don't think they do too. So that happened as well.
And just to quickly add on, at a federal level, there hasn't been a lot of legislation passed into law on anything, much less on AI regulation. But I will say that the Take It Down Act that I mentioned earlier would be the first regulation that would be signed into law that sort of goes after these deep fakes, which is in part AI generated.
Your comment earlier about people in this room being IT savvy and all that made me want to jump in. So I run a research and media institute focused on surveillance tech and proliferating privacy tools. We're huge fans of EFF and what you guys do, so thank you. But we give out grants, research grants for people who want to reverse engineer everyday technology to try to understand what kind of surveillance is going on. So if anyone in here is tech savvy and is interested in participating in research like that, please come and chat to me after.
Community organizing and networking among each other is also very important.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just so grateful for this EFF network. I've been really grateful to be sort of more plugged in to the community that we have here, all of our members. It's been really eye-opening to have all these people with various backgrounds. It's quite different than the folks that I have had in my network from DC, and it's been really wonderful to sort of get to know all the EFF folks.
So it looks like that is actually all the time that we have for today. I want to thank you all for being here, and I want you to hang out, stick around for a little while, continue our conversations from before. Feel free to ask any lingering questions to Chao and Maddie here. If you want to check out new EFF gear or even renew your membership, you can do that with Christian at the table over there. But mostly I just want to say thank you for coming out and for being a part of this community. We really, really appreciate it. Now let's, before we go, let's just give one final big round of applause to our speakers and to your fellow members. Thank you so much.